Well, hello and welcome, and today you'll find me on Stormy Down, a rather bleak place bordering the M4 overlooking Porthcawl. With this windswept, rocky scrubland location, you can understand why most people think this is the reason why it's called Stormy in the name Stormy Down. It's well suited, but it's actually not the case why it's called Stormy Down, and we'll get onto that very shortly. You probably can hear the M4 in the background. Most people don't know much about Stormy Down, not even the locals. They may know about the limestone quarries in the area, or even the history of RAF Stormy Down. RAF Stormy Down was a World War II air base, and during the war it trained over 10,000 Allied aircrew. But I'm going to look at something much older than that, and from where Stormy Down actually gets its name from. I was saying how bleak this area is. With the sun out and the birds singing, it's really nice. Anyway, we're in Wales, so that means castles. As you probably know from my other videos, there are a number of castles in the area. Kenfig, which is really close, Coity, Ogmore, and these were built by the Normans, and many of them were the classic Motte and Bailey constructions. If you remember from your school days, the Bailey was the enclosure, a courtyard with a ditch around, maybe a wooden palisade, and inside was the artificial mound or the hill known as the Motte, and on top of that was the keep, the central tower. And initially they were made quickly out of wood, and then later fortified and strengthened in stone, and these are the remains we can see today. But not all of these castles made it to the stone constructions. Some were simply left, and that brings us on to Stormy Down Castle. This was built in the 12th century in the classic Motte and Bailey construction, but it never became a stone castle. We're going to have a look, and you can clearly see the Motte and the Bailey area, although the ditch around has disappeared. And instead of being built up on the hill there, on the remote rugged rock area, or over in Kevin Krubu area, it was built in the valley, maybe because it's really fertile, there's a water source. And this brings us on to the name of the area. This castle was built in the 12th century by a Norman known as Geoffrey Sturmy, S-T-U-R-M-I. Stormy, is the connection? Anyway, let's make our way towards Stormy Down Castle. Well, one of the first mentions of Stormy Down Castle is back in 1154, when it's written in his ville, in the wilderness, on his land, where no one had hitherto ploughed. So obviously that refers to the remoteness and how there wasn't a previous settlement there. And for the Normans, this must have been frontier land. Although there's no direct reports of an attack on Stormy Down Castle, in 1167 there are reports of the Welsh attacking Kenfig Castle, and that's only a few miles away. So this must have been a dangerous place to live, and it must have been attacked. Well, what happened to Geoffrey Sturmy? Well, as you know, as I mentioned, the castle never became a stone structure, although the farmland around it was acquired over time by the neighbouring Cistercian monks at Margam Abbey. And Geoffrey Sturmy, he actually became a lay brother of Margam Abbey. Anyway, let's go and take a look at Stormy Down Castle. So it doesn't look much. I would now be standing in the Bailey, and that hill, that is the Motte. Currently it's about 100 feet in diameter and about 10 feet high, but obviously in its day it would have been much bigger. Cadw, who are the Welsh agency in charge of historic places, say this area has got significant archaeological potential. So there's lots more to be discovered. So this is the Motte, the mound, and on top of it would have stood the wooden keep, the tower. And although it's in a valley, I've still got good views towards Porthcawl and the sea, up towards Stormy Down, and there's quite a distance between me and the hills behind. And remember, this would have been much taller. Just a reminder, this is farmland, so if you do visit, show some respect and close the gates, etc. So after the monks acquired the land from the Sturmy family, they built a couple of granges in the area. And if you remember from my scare house video, granges were farms, estates, used to support the monastery itself. And there are remains of one of those over in the southeast corner, about 200 yards away from the castle. And that's where we're heading to next. Well, just 200 yards from the castle lies the remains of one of the granges. It consists of 3 stone buildings lying within a dry stone wall enclosure about 60 metres in diameter. There are some other buildings and structures, but they're much later. Well, anyway, in the corner, if you look carefully, in the corner of one of the buildings, you can still find the spiral staircase. Up we go. So that was a look at Stormy Down. Although it's close to the M4, quarries and industrial estates, it still feels strangely wild and remote, especially in the winter months. Anyway, don't forget to catch up with our other videos, local ones and our travels around the world, and we'll see you in one of those. Bye.